Jim Brown played 9 years in the NFL. 8 of those 9 years he was all pro. He never missed a game, guys, in 9 years, never missed a game. I remember one of the first times I talked to him, I said, Jim, did you ever miss a game? And if you knew Jim well, he would lean into you when he wanted to emphasize something. He goes, Jimmy, I never missed a practice. And he had that kind of mindset. He scored 126 touchdowns, that's 1 touchdown per game. He was the MVP of the league 4 out of 9 years, so half the time almost he was the MVP. He averaged 100 yards rushing, and in 1964 he led the Cleveland Browns to the NFC Championship. There was no Super Bowl at the time. Unquestionably the greatest Cleveland Brown ever, and we had the second best sitting right in front of me. And arguably, as Coach Belichick said, the greatest NFL player of all time. But Jim was more than a football player. If you think about it, the last year he played football was 1965, okay? If you're good at math, that was 58 years ago. He transcended football. Jim got into the entertainment business as an actor, and then Jim was into social justice before there was social justice, if you think about it. And those of us who are associated with the NFL, I think all of us consider it a real privilege, whether you're a player, a coach, a scout, an equipment manager. No matter what you are, it's a real privilege to be involved in the NFL for lots of different reasons. And my favorite reason is the people you get to meet. And probably at the top of our list, and we've had the privilege of meeting lots of people, are Jim and Monique Brown. And when we bought the Browns, Jim was not associated with the Browns. And I can't even remember how it happened, but we had a long dinner one night in Cleveland for probably about 3 hours. And if you know Jim well, he was great one-on-one, pretty good in a small group, hated talking on the telephone, okay? Did not like talking on the telephone, but he was great one-on-one. And after about an hour, you realize that this was a special person. And we had the opportunity to spend time with him numerous times like that over the following 10 or 11 years. The last time Monique was during COVID, it was December of 2020, and we were out there on business. Monique and Jim had us at their gorgeous home overlooking the LA Basin. It was a beautiful night. We got there at 6 and left at 10. And it was one of our favorite nights of all time. And people ask me, what do you take from Jim Brown? And I would say 3 things. First of all, he loved football, he loved the NFL, and he loved Cleveland Browns in Cleveland, Ohio. There's no doubt about it. And what makes that interesting is he only lived there for 9 years of his 86 or 87 years, right? He lived in California more than everywhere. But Cleveland was special to him. Not just the Browns, but the city of Cleveland, Northeast Ohio was really special to him. The second thing we noticed about Jim early on, and it carried the entire time we were with him, is that he had a rare blend of all superstar athletes, and there's a bunch of them in the crowd today, have this special confidence. Joe Thomas, I saw it time and time again, that at the right moment, they were going to make a big shot, a big block, a big tackle, throw a great pass, catch a big pass, etc. You have to have that. It's not arrogance, but it's supreme confidence that I can do this, I can beat the individual across from me. And Jim definitely had that, okay? And I remember one time, and he carried it his entire life. I remember 2 or 3 years ago as he was starting to slow down physically, he loved golf. And I said, Jim, I said, you still play golf? He shook his head. He said, I can't get the damn ball out of my shadow. And he was just kind of going like this. Then he had that little gleam in his eye. If you knew Jim, he would get, and he leaned into me. He says, but if it's $150 Nassau and it's on 18 and you need a 10-foot putt, call me. That was Jim. And I also saw the humility. Jim worked with us for 11 years, I think. He never once called and said, you should do that, you should do this, you made a mistake here. He never ever did that. All he would do is call and say, can I help you? What can I do to help? And we had a player, particularly a player who maybe off the field was struggling. He would call and say, hey, can I have dinner with him? Can I have lunch with him? How can I spend time with him? How can I help him? And he had that kind of humility that is rare that you see with people with supreme confidence. So he's a rare blend of that. I remember the first night we were talking, we really didn't talk about football any, and I said, Jim, when did you retire from acting? Now, I've known him for maybe 45 minutes. He started laughing. He says, Jimmy, you don't really retire from acting. They just quit calling you. And we just laughed, and he thought that was hilarious. But he was a guy who could also laugh at himself, okay? And then finally, what I would say is, Jim had a supreme ability to bring people together. And if you think about, and I'm sure he and Monique talked about this before he passed, think about the people he's invited to speak today, okay? One of the great players of all time, Ray Lewis, who Jim respected a lot, not just as a great player, but as a great person. And Ray, I'm sure he told you this, but I used to say, Jim, who's going to like take your role when you're not here? And he goes, Ray Lewis, without hesitating. Thought the world of Ray Lewis. Bob Arum, for those of us who grew up in the Ali Frazier era, I went to all 3 fights with my dad at Knoxville Coliseum, closed circuit, and he understood entertainment and sports and how those coexist way before anybody else did. And at 91, soon to be 92 years old, he's still promoting fights. He's promoting one in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia with Tyson Fury in October. Still tremendous energy, but another great friend of Jim's. Rock Johnson. Most of you probably don't know that name. Rock was in jail for 19 years. To put it in perspective, when he got out, he was 33. So y'all can do the math. He said, I was headed right back to jail, and somehow Jim Brown called me over to his house. I won't describe the conversation like Rock described it to me, but it was a pretty heated conversation. He single-handedly turned around Rock's life. Rock now works with people who have either been in prison or are in danger of going to prison, and he actually ran Jim's organization, American, for many, many years. People don't know that kind of thing about him, okay? John Wooten, his lifelong friend, blocking mate as a guard, probably best friend he had, I'm guessing, unbelievable person, cares deeply about Cleveland, but also cares about people and players. And then, of course, his lifelong love, Monique. So just a unique group of people that probably only Jim Brown could put together. And I would say this in closing, that as good as a football player as he was, and he was obviously unbelievable, what he did after his career, I think transcended that and far surpassed his great career. Jim had an unbelievable gift of bringing people together. Dee has in her office in Berea, where we practice and work, a picture of the Cleveland Summit, and there were about 10 individuals in there, and I can't remember them all. Some of them wouldn't know, but it was Muhammad Ali, it was Bill Russell, it was Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, it was Jim Brown. And he brought them together during a period of great civil unrest, not up to a bunch of hullabaloo, there wasn't a bunch of stuff going back and forth, but hey, how can we get this country to work better together? How do we get whites and blacks to focus better together? That's the kind of guy Jim Brown was, and the country is much better, of course, to have Jim Brown as a football player, but more importantly, the man. So Monique, thank you very much. We all miss him dearly. Thank you.